This video series takes a look at the Japanese and English versions of the original Pokemon anime and compares some of the changes that 4Kids made to the show when they brought it to the West. Due to the large amount of differences, these videos will be mainly taking a look at the visual changes between the episodes. However, sometimes they will also bring up differences to other things such as the translations as well. One thing important to point out though is that to avoid potential copyright issues, footage will have to be kept to a minimum and only what is needed to be shown will be displayed. But with that out of the way, let's take a look at the English and Japanese versions of the very first Pokemon episode, or as Pokemon is known in Japan, PocketMonsters. The first episode is titled Pokemon I Choose You, and interestingly the Japanese version has the exact same name. This is typically the case for the earlier episodes, but after a while it seems that 4Kids decided to take more liberties when it came to the English episodes' names. 4Kids also sometimes tended to make jokes with the English script where there were none originally. The scene where Ash first gets Pikachu, for example, was much more serious in the Japanese version. In the English release, Professor Oak instead makes various electricity puns, such as Pikachu having an electrifying personality, and how shocking this is. Ever wonder how Ash knew which Pokemon were contained in the Pokeballs? You may recall how he picked Squirtle first, then Bulbasaur, and lastly Charmander, but gets told that all of the balls are now empty. Well, over in Japan, the balls actually had the Pokemon's names written on their sides as shown here. Next up, we have a change made to a banner held by the crowd of people cheering Ash on. This banner displays Japanese text reading "Good luck Satoshi," Satoshi being Ash's name over in Japan. Rather than removing the text, this time 4Kids translated it for the English versions into "Go Ash Go." Another change that was made to the first episode appears to be a case of 4Kids feeling that the original was too violent for Western viewers. In the English release, when Ash first meets Misty, she asks them if they're okay, but then screams that she didn't mean him but Pikachu. In the Japanese version, however, you can actually see Misty slapping Ash for putting Pikachu in harm's way, with also the slap sound effect being removed from the dub. Moving on to episode 2, which is titled Pokemon Emergency over in the West, and in the Japanese version, Showdown Pokemon Center. This episode had various forms of translation differences, the first of these being found when Ash receives a phone call from his mother. In the Japanese version, his mother tells him to make sure to brush his teeth every morning and evening. Over in the West though, she asks him whether he's been changing his underwear. The next change highlights a common edit that 4Kids made to the show outside of Japan, this being the removal of Japanese food references. Whereas in Japan, Ash, when talking to Professor Oak on the phone, asks whether the professor is cooking ramen, in the English version he makes no mention of the ramen boiling in the water, and instead just says that he didn't recognise the back of the professor's head. In fact, ramen was changed a little later as well. The professor ends the phone call by exclaiming that the ramen is overcooking. Not only did the English versions change this into his pizza being delivered, but it even added a doorbell sound effect. Episode 3 is titled Ash Catches a Pokemon in the West, and over in Japan, I Got a Pokemon. It features multiple instances of graphical changes being made, and for various reasons. The first of these can be seen where Caterpie gets yelled at by Misty for being gross, which makes them sad and upset. Over in Japan, the shot of Caterpie looking sad actually contained Japanese letters scrolling across the screen. These letters spell out a Japanese sound effect, which means something like "big horrible revelation." Whilst not a graphical change, another edit was made to Ash's dialogue when he first catches Caterpie. He says that when Pokemon are in heaven, referring to their comfortable life inside the Pokeballs, he's in heaven too. Misty replies to this by saying, "When you guys are in heaven, I'm in hell." 4Kids, however, likely felt that the religious heaven and hell references were too inappropriate for Western audiences, with the removal of even small religious themes being a very common edit during this time period in not just TV shows but also video games and other media. So when the lines were dubbed in English, Ash instead says, "I love my new little Pokemon," and then Misty replies, "I guess it takes a worm to love a worm." Next up is yet another case of Misty slapping Ash, which 4Kids decided to remove in the English versions. Misty gets mad at Ash for using a bug type Pokemon against a bird type and scolds him for being careless. In the English version, the slap part was cut out, but interestingly, if you listen closely, you'll still be able to hear the slap sound effect.
I am the greatest! You're the worst! You have no idea what you're doing!
Lastly, we have a graphical change that was made towards the end of the episode when Pidgeotto fights Ekans in Coughing. First though, I'd like to warn those of you who are sensitive to flashing lights to proceed with caution when viewing the next section. You see, when Ekans and Coughing attacked Pidgeotto, there were originally fast flashing lights in the background. Over in the West though, these flashing lights were slowed down considerably as shown here. This episode didn't broadcast in the US until more than a year after the Japanese release, and during this time span was Japan's infamous Electric Soldier Porygon incident. Electric Soldier Porygon is the name of a later episode which caused hundreds of kids to have seizures because of its use of flashing strobe light effects. Amongst other things, this led to the episode being pulled and never shown again. Thus, despite no seizures being reported due to this scene in episode 3, everybody involved wanted to be extra careful about flashing lights following the Porygon incident, and so the lights were toned down. That's all for this time though, but with over 270 episodes to go, and that's only talking about the original series, there are many more changes still left to be uncovered. If you're interested in seeing more, then please leave a comment below and hit that subscribe button, and until next time, thank you for watching.